What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the podcast. I have an amazing episode for you today. I get so many questions about investing. I try to promote investing. I wish someone would have taught me about investing when I was younger. So I thought to help you guys out, I brought on Jeremy of Personal Finance Club. Jeremy is out there helping people, promoting an easy, simple, lazy way of investing that truly, truly works. And it's not only him promoting this way. I've heard this from Tony Robbins, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Lots of people promote this method. It's the method that they don't tell you about because they want to sell you things. Financial planners want to sell you things. Financial advisors want to sell you things. But this way you can do it yourself. It's very simple. Jeremy built up a strong business, a tech business, sold it off, made a lot of money, became personally knowledgeable on investing, and now he's helping other people grow their portfolios and their personal finance in the Personal Finance Club. You probably see me post about him on Instagram. Go follow him. And yeah, so much good, actionable, easy information in this podcast to get you started on your path to financial freedom. But before we get into the episode, a little bit of the vintage news today. T-shirt yesterday on the virtual flea sold for $6,000. The Aladdin Disney DeSantis t-shirt from the Heat Broker sold for $6K, breaking records once again, which is crazy because before that the record was like $3K. So basically doubled the record. You know, it's wild. This shit is jumping so fast. Where is the ceiling on this? Will we see a $10,000 t-shirt coming up here soon from the 90s? It is crazy. And I love it. It's a wild, wild west, the vintage business right now. And I'm really interested to see where it goes. Hit me with your thoughts on Instagram. Follow me and let's chat. In other news, we just dropped wholesale t-shirt bundles on F as in Frank. Most of them sold out, but there's a few left as of posting this podcast. So go check that out. Wholesale t-shirt bundles, 24 packs, mixed printed 90s, 80s shirts. There's a few different categories to choose from. And I'm going to be dropping lots more wholesale bundles on there. So make sure you go check out the website, fasinfrankvintage.com. Go download our app in the Android and iOS store. And without further ado, let's get into this episode with Jeremy of Personal Finance Club. Get your notepad, take some notes. At the end of this episode, I will do a quick recap that just runs you through this stuff. I did a lot of research. We talk about the American market a lot in this episode, but I did a lot of research for the Canadian market because I know a lot of people are interested and it's harder to find info. So I'm going to do a recap, spell it out, give you the Canadian stock tickers, the Canadian investment brokerage accounts you want to be messing with, and hopefully this gets you started on your path.
Vintage clothing by the rack, yeah. Just check out my Insta, how you gon' argue with that? Everything you see I manifest. I'm an architect, I think I'ma run it back. We got vintage clothing by the rack. Just check out my Insta, how you gon' argue with that? Everything you see I manifest. I'm an architect, I think I'll have some of that.
All right, we're live. Jeremy, thank you for coming on the show. I have been following you for quite some time. I don't know how I came upon your Instagram account, but your Instagram account is Personal Finance Club, correct?
Yes, thank you.
And I love what you're doing. You're helping a lot of people, and I send a lot of people your way. And the reason I wanted you on the show is because I feel like a lot of my listeners need to hear this stuff. It's the stuff that, you know, if you're lucky, your parents told you about. You're on the right track, but most parents didn't. They don't talk about this stuff in school. And, you know, I am big on helping the younger generation in my industry because I wish somebody would have helped me when I was younger and I would have got started a lot earlier. But I'm started now, and here we are, and we're going to help people out.
Nice. Yeah, that is what fuels my passion as well, which is, you know, if you can find that 20 or 25 or 30-year-old who, has worked their whole lifetime so far to like make a career and get educated and get a job and get income. And then they have the benefit of this long period of the rest of their career over which they can like build wealth. And if you can just like inject into them some knowledge about personal finance and investing, it can make a massive difference. It's like a little course change that early in life can make a massive difference down the road. And so like that excites me, where just a small amount of my time and effort can like make a big difference in someone's life. So that's why I do this.
It's awesome, man. And I tell people that all the time. I'm like, I'm turning 40 this summer, but a lot of the people I, connect with in this business are, like you said, 20 somethings, some early 20s, even teens. And I tell them, I'm like, if you get on this path early, you can be done by the time you're my age, So let's start with who you are, what you've done in your life to get you to where you are right now.
That reminds me of the Simpsons episode where this reporter's like, who are you and what are you doing here? And like, do your research. No, I'm just kidding. It's for the audience. Yeah, my name is... I know,
but you probably tell a lot better.
I know. It's like a funny question. Who are you and why are you here? My name is Jeremy Schneider, and I have an organization called Personal Finance Club, where I have kind of been focusing on Instagram mostly to start. So you can find me at Personal Finance Club. And I basically help people learn about personal finance and investing. My own story is a little bit different than the traditional just invest early and often story, which is when I graduated college, I started an internet company at the age of 21 or 22 or something, which I grew for 12 years. And then at the age of 34, I sold it for a bit over $5 million. And then at the age of 36, I quit my job that was working for that same company that has since been acquired. And I haven't had a job since then. I'm also turning 40 this year. So shout out to 1980 birth year.
Yeah, my man.
You said this summer, so I think you got me by a couple months then, because I'm in November.
Makes me feel bad. I'm older than you. You probably have a bigger portfolio than me, man.
Well, maybe not for long though. Yeah, and so despite me being kind of a tech guy who sold a company, like baked into my story is everything that I preach, which is live below your means, spend less than you make, and invest early and often. I call those like the 2 rules of Personal Finance Club. And they seem simple and maybe they seem obvious to some, but basically everything else in the world of finance boils down to that. If you spend less than you make and you take that difference and you invest it constantly, you will build massive wealth over your career. And if you don't do those 2 things, you will be broke. It's that simple.
Yeah. Okay. So I love that. I think a lot of people, they think as they make more money, they can buy more nice things, buy a new car, buy a bigger house, take more lavish vacations. But the theory here is, keep pushing to make more money, but you can live the same and keep investing that money and then be done one day and you can live a long, happy retirement.
Yeah. Well, I think like to your point, the normal American experience is like make money, spend money. Any money you come in, you automatically spend it. And there's 2 problems with that. One is a math problem, which is if you spend everything you make, you'll always be broke. And the other, I think, is this like incorrect connection with spending and happiness, where people think happiness is just over the next, thing they buy, the next trip they take, the next car they lease or whatever, when in fact, spending more money does not make you happier. Statistically, like studies have shown that, if you're in poverty and you come out of poverty, then for sure that makes you happier. But I think the number is like 70,000 a year, where like any dollar you make over $70,000 a year does not correlate to more happiness. And the median household income in the US is like 65. So it's not even like it's this massively big amount of money. It's like once basically, where your next meal is coming from, your like transportation, housing, and like the occasional trip and stuff is taken care of, like upgrading to first class doesn't make you happier. Driving a Ferrari instead of a Toyota doesn't make you happier. It doesn't like add this internal sense of happiness, but people keep seeking that out, keep seeking out happiness by spending. When in reality, I think most people would be happier if they buy themselves freedom, right? Like, if you're leasing a BMW with a $700 a month car payment and you're driving to work in traffic every day just to make that payment, that's not a happy situation, right? But if you spend half of what you make instead of all what you make, and 13 or 14 or 15 years into your career, you have what they call fuck you money, then you can quit. And can I swear on this podcast?
Oh yeah, man.
Okay, good. Yeah, if you have fuck you money, then you can quit, or you can keep working, or you can switch careers, you can start a business, you can volunteer half your time or whatever. And like that amount of like directing, that's what everyone really wants. Like, oh, I wish I could tell my boss to I wish I could, start a vintage resale business, or whatever the thing that they like really want to do. If you're always chasing a paycheck to make all the payments and just barely like making it every month, that's not a happy existence. And it's not happy today because you're stressed out. And it's definitely not going to be happy when you're 65 and you think, I want to stop working one of these days and I have no money.
Yeah. Back to your business for one sec. I've read a lot of things in the last couple of years. It's my journey into investing and passive income has only been 4 years or so, really. I've had my own business for 15 years, so I know what that's all about. But, when you read about it, basically the main ways to make real big wealth is to do what you did, to sell a business. It's hard to generate enough money in your own business to just be super rich and retire. Inherit money, which some people get lucky enough to inherit family wealth, or it's investing. Those are the three main ways to create real wealth. So what was your business that you sold? I know I'm going to get that question.
So it's a company called Rentlinx, RENTLINX, and it's in the apartment rental space or apartment listing space. And so if you're a renter and you want to look for an apartment, you could go to Zillow or Craigslist or apartments.com or rentals.com. There's 50 of these different sites out there, more or less. And if you're a landlord and you want to advertise your rental, you could like go post to 50 different sites, but it's a difficult, time-consuming process and to figure out which ones are good and which ones are worth it. So I made a site called Rentlinx where it links all these sites together, where basically you post once onto Rentlinx if you're a landlord, and then it automatically syndicates to all 50 of those sites. And so when you go to Zillow or apartments.com or Apartment Guide and you search for an apartment, a lot of that data is actually flowing through the technology that I built, back 15 years ago. We've since been acquired, or it was since acquired by a company called AppFolio, which is a great company that I'm still on really good terms with. And they're continuing to, use that tool.
Nice.
Probably pretty different from your space, but
very different. But we do a lot online. I know a lot of developers, but that sounds like a great idea. And obviously they've used that technology now. And was it technology that they were interested in, or the actual format that you were using it for?
I think it was. I think they the acquiring company identified that what we had built was pretty hard to build, and the partnerships we had built was pretty difficult, and the customers we had were very loyal customers, and the revenue stream we had was a very clean, good line of revenue that was likely to be stable and increase. So I think for all those reasons, and I think they saw a really big strategic advantage to using that technology and basically reselling it to their customers, because they had a very big customer base, but nothing to do what we did. And so if they could just plug this in and sell to them. So I think for all those reasons, they thought it was a good acquisition. And I think, I don't want to speak for them, but everything I've heard from them to this day, they say it was one of their best deals, and they're very happy with it and all that stuff.
Nice. Good for you. Okay, let's get into the investing here. That's what this podcast's about.
I love it.
We want to learn from you, okay? So I think I want to just start at the bare bones basics. I think what scares a lot of people away from investing is just the first step. It's how to even begin, the who, what, where, how of getting started investing your money in the market.
That's great, because I'm a simple man. Yeah. Complex topics scare and confuse me. And so I also like to start with the basic building blocks. And I think that's why I always talk about my 2 rules, which is if you spend less than you make and you invest early and often, you will be in great shape, even if you don't do it perfectly, right? And so I always say, don't let perfect be the enemy of good. And so, the thing to do before you invest isn't to necessarily be super encyclopedic about every single potential way to invest on the planet. It is just to basically like get a good basic understanding of what is a good way to invest and go that way. That said, in my opinion, it turns out the best way to invest is very, very simple. And it just, and to your point, like investing is a scary, confusing world. There's like hedge funds and day trading and stock tips and, Bitcoin and gold and derivatives and options and futures and like how could someone possibly, there's $1 billion high rises on Wall Street where guys make millions of dollars, and like how could a person
buy, sell, go, come on, let's go.
Right, exactly. Like how could an individual possibly like dip their foot in that world and not just be eaten alive? And so let's break it down. So basically there's only two things you should ever invest in my opinion. One is investment real estate. That's like buying a house and renting it out, or buying an apartment building and renting it out. And the other is stocks and bonds, like collectively called equities. It's basically just like, digital currency that you can buy, or currency, but digital like stakes in companies and loans and stuff. And so let's ignore real estate for a second, because that could be a whole separate world. And frankly, I don't think you ever have to invest in real estate. I think you can. I think it's good, but it's a whole line of business that requires like lots of experience and learning.
Just a quick sidebar.
Yeah.
So what got me started in investing was Rich Dad, Poor Dad books. So if you want to learn a lot about that method, please go read that book. It'll kick you in the ass to at least get started and get more interested in the housing market. But let's keep going with stocks.
Yeah, I love that book. And when I sold my company, I had this like sudden wealth. I didn't want to waste the money, and so I basically read every book I could on personal finance and investing. And it turns out they all basically say the same thing. They say, Rich Dad Poor Dad, his big thing is like assets, not liability. So he's like, buy stuff that pays you money, not stuff that costs you money, right? Like that's like, he's like, keep it simple. And so, and like the two things, so to connect to Rich Dad Poor Dad, the two things you can buy that always pay you money are investment real estate and stocks and bonds. Gold doesn't pay you money. Bitcoin doesn't pay you money. Day trading doesn't pay you money. Like all the other stuff is just under the umbrella of investing, but it's not a good thing to buy. So you buy the things that pay you money. That's what real investing, wealth building investing is. So stocks and bonds is where you should invest. That's where it's easy, fast, like can be very simple. And so buying a stock is basically giving someone else who owns a little piece of a company money, and then they give you that share of stock. And so, for example, if you owned one share of Apple, I think today Apple is trading at, $300 a share or something. I could give you $300. You could give me your share of Apple. And then I own one share of the company of Apple. And then what that means is, as long as I hold that share of stock, a piece of Apple's profits are due to me in the form of dividends. And so like if I owned Apple stock for a year, I think they're paying like 2% in dividends right now. So 2% of $300 is $6. So for my one share, just holding it for a year, I would get 6 free bucks. Doesn't sound like that big, doesn't sound like that big of a deal yet, but we'll get there. So, and the other benefit to owning a share of stock is I can sell it. So like, let's say you sold me it for 300, and then a year later, after I collect my $6, someone else wants to buy it. And I was like, I kind of like collecting $6. They're like, okay, I'll give you 350 for it. And I was like, all right, fair enough. And so then I made 50 bucks in the change of the share price and $6 in dividends. And that's basically the two ways that you make money from stocks.
Yeah.
Change in share price and dividends.
Okay. I want to break it down even to the basic level of where do people acquire the stocks? You have to have an account, and let's discuss the different account options for people to be buying their stocks in.
Okay. So yeah, you're a hands-on, and I'm the same way. Like it's what I just described is a very abstract concept, because if you're watching this or listen to it on a podcast, you can't see a share of stock, and we didn't actually exchange anything. So yeah, you basically open up a bank account. So just like you can open up a savings account or a checking account, there's a third type of account called a brokerage account. And a brokerage account was invented 100 years ago when shares of stock were invented. And basically, inside of your checking and savings account, you hold cash, and inside of your brokerage account, you hold shares of stocks, bonds, index funds, all the kinds of things that you invest in. And so to open a brokerage account, you go to a brokerage website. And like the big ones are Fidelity, Vanguard, and Schwab. Those are kind of like the three biggest traditional online brokers. They manage the most money. They're monsters. You've probably heard those words.
Of course, yeah.
Um,
And you can also open up a brokerage investment account within most typical banking structures, right?
I wouldn't.
Because of the fees.
Because of the fees and the investment options. And so, you know, the killer of investment growth is fees. And so Bank of America, Wells Fargo, your local credit union, they will tell you that they can open a brokerage account for you. But inside of that brokerage account, they either will charge these massively terrible fees, or they will have really bad investment options. Like, you know, credit unions, I love them. I think they're really nice. I think their mission is solid. But as far as investment, you know, entities, they're not good, because they'll sell you a brokerage account, and then inside the brokerage account, they basically recommend you put a CD, which is a certificate of deposit, which is basically pays like a tiny amount of interest. And when you're investing, you don't want a tiny amount of interest. You want real big long-term growth by buying stocks, not by buying cash like a CD. So yeah, so I would say Vanguard, Fidelity, Schwab are like the big three traditional ones. And there's kind of this like new crop of kind of like newer ones. Betterment and Acorns are two of the popular ones. Both of those, which I like. The fees are a little bit higher than the three big traditional guys, but also the site is way easier to use. And so if anyone ever tells me, hey, I'm using Acorns, I'm using Betterment, should I switch? I was like, if you like it and that's going to cause you to invest more, stick with it. It's not what I use, just because I think they don't have quite as many options and quite as low of fees as the other three.
Because you're so essentially, you know, I have like an RBC, it's a Canadian bank. I have my investment account in there. I have a TFSA, which is our version of like the Roth IRA, and I invest within that. I also have another outsourced investment account that I haven't really started to play with yet. But so you're saying the amount of available funds like ETFs, stocks, all these things is limited within that account?
So I didn't realize you're Canadian, and so everything I'm saying is like as a very like.
No, to be honest, most of my viewers are American. It's fine.
Okay, yeah, so very U.S. centric view, and so those brokerages change dramatically when you switch countries. Like I know if you're like in Europe, you can't use any of those three except for I think Vanguard serves the UK or something like that. And so, you know, but to answer your question, yeah, for sure, in certain brokerages, the options in which you can invest can be different. And the fee structures definitely can be different. But I'm not sure about
how does the bank attach a fee to like a stock? Like if I buy Tesla with my investment account bank versus like Fidelity, is it the same, or am I going to get charged more for investing in Tesla?
Many ways. So many ways. And so, you know, for first, there's transactional fees. You know, they could just charge you per trade, like $5 or $10 per trade. There's account fees, just like a 1% fee on everything that's under in the account that they take out every month. There's like monthly account fees. There are things called loads where, you know, when you put money in, they take a certain amount of money off the top. There are these 12B-1 fees. You know, not all of these apply to your account. A 12B-1 fee is like a kickback paid from a mutual fund to the person who helped you invest. There's sales commissions. There's, you know, and honestly, like, the fees are, I live and breathe this stuff every single day. And when people ask me like, how do I see all the fees? I'm like, dude, like, it's like whack-a-mole, because every time you identify a few fees, they like create 6 different fees in a different, more even confusing way to find out. And so you basically have to like be pretty astute. And, you know, in my opinion, just kind of like go towards the players in the industry who are well known for having the lowest fees. And
I have read a lot about this. So do you know a good one that services Canada?
I think Vanguard services Canada.
Okay, I'm going to look into it. I'll put that in the show notes here.
Yeah,
we'll check on that.
We'll do some research. So Vanguard, for some background, was founded by a guy named Jack Bogle. And he is the inventor of the index fund, which we haven't quite got to what that is yet. But an index fund is basically a collection of all the stocks in the market. And before he invented the index fund, basically the only way to invest was through these stockbrokers and mutual fund managers who charged you super high fees to go trade for you, which sounds good, except their fees were so high, they basically returned you less money than the underlying assets which they're trading. And everybody was doing this, right? So like everybody was giving all the money to the stockbrokers. Stockbrokers were taking all this money off the top and then returning some lesser amount to the investors. And Jack Bogle said, wait a minute, like I would be better off if like, we'd all be better off if like the stockbrokers were just basically taken out of the equation and we just all got direct access to the full value of the growth of the stock market. And so that's what an index fund is. So Jack Bogle founded Vanguard, created the world's first index fund. And to this day, they are basically the leader in index fund investing. And their business model is set up such that the business is owned by the funds that you invest in. And the reason that matters is because there's not an intrinsic misaligned incentive to increase fees to take it out of the funds. And so if you invest with your bank, you know, some person owns the bank and they maybe have shareholders or investors and they want to make their bank profitable for the people that, you know, put the money into it, which is fine, you know, from a capitalism perspective. But from a conflict of interest perspective, they are going to try to sneak in fees in there to like make their business more profitable. Whereas Vanguard basically, you know, at least from what I understand, from maybe they're just good at marketing, I don't know, but doesn't do that. And what I can for sure give them credit for is creating the world's first index fund. So Vanguard is like, you know, whenever anyone uses Vanguard, I say, great, like whoever put you down that path gave you like altruistic, unbiased advice. It's not the only good way to go, but you know, I feel like that's kind of always a good option.
I'm personally in a lot of Vanguard funds.
Nice.
And I think they're great. And I read a lot about that too. So to break this down, just very simple terms, an index fund, also called an ETF, correct?
They're basically the exact same thing. They differ only in how they trade. Either one is fine. They grow the exact same way.
ETF, index fund, same as far as we're concerned here on our level. And they hold stake in a sector of the market. So you can get a technology index fund that will follow the top tech companies of the market, correct? You can get an S&P 500 index fund, right?
Yeah, so I think you might be more broadly describing a mutual fund. And so to go back to like my rant about stocks, so if we opened up one of these accounts and I bought a share of Apple stock, like the next logical question is, okay, which stocks do I buy? And people ask themselves that question to this day, every single day. Should you buy Tesla? Should you buy Apple? Should you buy Amazon, Netflix, Google, whatever? And it turns out that's a nearly impossible question to answer. And so, and people have had this question today and they've had it 50 years ago. And so 50 years ago, you would say, hey, I'm just an individual guy. I don't know all this stuff. So you basically turn your money over to a mutual fund. And a mutual fund is a mutual thing where a bunch of people mutually put their money in a fund, mutual fund, bunch of people have money. And then that fund has a manager who then takes that sum total of money. So you might put in $1,000, I might put in $1,000, 1,000 other people put in $1,000, and then the mutual fund manager has $1 million to go, and then he or she picks and chooses stocks for you. So he could have a technology mutual fund and say, okay, I'm just going to pick the best tech stocks. I'm going to look at all tech stocks, not going to buy the crappy ones. I am going to buy the good ones. And then we put our money in. Then as that fund grows, that money is sent, the growth is sent back to us, you know, in proportion to how much we contributed. And then the fund manager takes their fee every year, which is usually on a range of like 1% of the total assets under management per year. So so mutual funds are great. To this day, they're still fine.
But there's a big warning against mutual funds because of the high fees.
Right. And so the problem with mutual funds is the manager, study after study after study, shows that the stock market is so efficient. All these stocks are priced basically exactly where they are based on the sum total of human knowledge. So when the manager is randomly picking and choosing stocks he or she thinks is good or bad, that person is no better than a random at getting it right, right? So when you give them all their money and they take a big fee and then they just randomly pick stocks for you, you'd be better off cutting that fee out of this loop and then investing directly. So that is what an index fund is. And so
yeah, so sorry, but there's lots of, like when you look at Vanguard index funds, there's lots of them.
There are, but I don't like to dig into that right away because the concept of an index fund isn't about identifying niche areas to focus on. The concept of an index fund is about buying everything. So when you buy an index fund, the idea is not to just buy a few stocks, it's to buy every stock. And so, you know, Vanguard's most popular, most famous index fund is VTSAX, which is the Vanguard Total Stock Market Index Fund. It is the US stock market. There's an international one too, and there's probably a Canadian one. And so, Vanguard has said, okay, here is the entire stock market. So instead of choosing just Apple, not Amazon, just Facebook, not Google, it's like you just own everything. And just instead of owning just tech, not oil, just transportation, not energy or whatever, you own everything. You own, and then that guarantees you, when you buy and hold VTSAX, that guarantees you your fair share of all market growth. And so for sure, there are other index funds. So the S&P 500 is like the 500 biggest companies in the US, which is like basically the total market.
Yeah.
But you could also buy like a small cap growth index fund, which is saying just looking at small companies that are likely to grow a lot. That's like that are identified as growth companies. But the problem with picking sectors like that or technology, like you mentioned, is that we have no idea if that's going to grow more or not in the future. It's very easy to look backwards and say, hey, tech has done great the last 10 years. I wish 10 years ago I was in all tech stocks for sure. But now we're to a point where they've been bid up so incredibly high. If you buy now into a tech index fund or a tech mutual fund, are those at that super high level? Is that growth still likely to continue and provide that kind of returns? And the answer is, I have no idea. And anyone who does tell you they have an idea is basically full of it. And so since we don't know what's going to happen in the future, we have to fall back on best investing practices, which is to buy the broad market, low fee index fund and guarantee yourself your fair share of all market growth.
And okay, so quick recap of this. Index funds, it's a broad market. You have the growth of the whole stock market, S&P 500. Now you're guaranteed to get the gains on that. If the companies aren't hitting that top 500 anymore, they drop off and something else jumps in there, right?
Yep.
I guess if you want to go more specific ETFs, then you're kind of gambling between like regular stocks and the S&P, and you still a gamble. You don't know if it's going to work. Over time, so over the since Vanguard has started these ETFs, which I don't know how many years ago that was.
75 was the first index fund, 1975.
So we're at like 45 years.
Yeah.
So over the span of VTSAX, what's the yearly growth on the index fund?
So over the history of the US stock market, and the international stock market is about the same. And again, sorry for the US centric view of the world, but the half of the world's economy basically is the US economy, and the other half.
Canadians know this, don't worry. It's not
okay, I know, yeah. you guys live a life of being America's hat up there, and you're like, I mean, you have a better country, but you also a smaller country, at least in terms of population and GDP. Yeah. I should say that better country. I was going to be like,
now you're pissing off the Americans, man.
Go to jail for treason or something. Certain things about the current leadership of our two countries, I think, leave something to be desired. So over the history of the U.S. stock market, if you look at the average cumulative annual growth rate, it's about 10%. And if you look at any 40-year period, no matter which 40 years you look at, it's about 10%. If you look at any one-year period, it goes up about 70% of the time and down about 30% of the time. If you look at like a 5-year period, it's like more like 85% up. If you look at a 10-year period, it's like 97% up. And there's never been a 20-year down period. So basically, there is a lot of this volatility in short periods of time, but over any long period of time, you're going to get about 10%. After you take into account inflation over the last 100 years or so has been about 2.9% per year. That means every year, if you just keep cash under your mattress, and if I have $100 right now, I can go buy, what is that, 10 subs at Subway or something. But if I wait 10 years, Subway's going to raise their prices, as is everyone else, and so now I can only buy 6 subs at Subway or something like that. And so inflation is kind of like the silent killer of cash, which is about 3%.
That's a super good point. I did have that on my list of things to talk about. I think a lot of people don't realize that cash is devaluing itself. Every day you hold cash, it's losing value essentially.
Yep. And yeah. So a lot of times if I'm talking to like a hyper risk averse person. They say, I'm not a gambler. I don't want to be in the market. I'm just going to keep it in cash where I know it's safe. I'm like, it ain't safe in cash. Like, you're losing it. Like, all that money you worked for is just, it's like a slow leak in the bottom of your tub. And if you go check it, a few years later, it's going to be half full now. And so, you have no choice but to basically be financially savvy and play the game.
I mean, the easiest example of that is like, housing markets. It's like, for what you could have bought when our parents were kids, to get a home, a 5-bedroom family home was a lot cheaper than what it costs now. Right. And it's not even comparable. And it's just, you're going to need a lot more money to buy things in the future. Plus, when we're speaking about this, the life expectancy is going to go up by the time we all retire and, or potentially get to that age where we're done. It's like, we'll have to support ourselves for longer than our parents will, and longer than their parents did, probably.
Yeah.
So
which is good.
It's great. We're going to live long lives, but you better be prepared with cash to enjoy it.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I think Canada's got some better social services than America, but either way, I don't think you want to be in a position where you're 65 and fully reliant on the government's handouts to like just barely feed yourself or whatever. I look at any sort of social security or even a pension as bonus, and I want to have enough money in my own name, in my own accounts, to basically like cover me indefinitely. Like, that's financial independence. That's fuck you money. That's like where freedom and choices and happiness really can be built.
Yeah. And back to the happiness thing, like you were saying, is like, you're right. Money won't, money beyond a certain point won't buy you happiness. You have to figure out how to be happy on your own. And, kind of the theory there is like, be addicted to the journey of it, right? And become happy with the journey of it and the process of getting there to your goal. But it's not the goal itself that will bring you the happiness.
Yeah. And, it's easy to say, it's like, it's the journey, not the destination or whatever. But I think that I think people with money, they always think that, oh, once I'm rich or once I make enough, like that is going to be where happiness is. And it's not. And so you just have to you have to change something else, because just getting that next raise or hitting $1 million in the bank or whatever is not gonna suddenly fix your life.
Yeah. No, time on the beach surfing is what's going to make me happy when I'm done.
Yeah. And you said process, so now I agree that you're Canadian. I wasn't sure before.
Okay. I haven't said process yet or out and about.
No, I haven't said about. I'm from Michigan, so actually grew up in Detroit. And if you're in Detroit and you go directly south, the first foreign country you hit is Canada. Not Mexico or something like that. So I feel like we're kind of
vice versa. You're coming north to Canada, man.
What was that?
You're coming north, aren't you?
No, if you're in, that's like a fun fact. If you're staying in downtown Detroit and you travel due south, the first foreign country you hit is Canada, because like Michigan is shaped like this, and Canada kind of comes around like that.
That's all the Great Lakes region. Yeah.
Go to Windsor.
I'm actually a dual citizen, so
nice.
My dad's from New Hampshire. I spent a lot of time out east.
Beautiful.
And like I told you before, I messaged you. I come down to LA all the time. Obviously, I've had a major stint here of not coming to LA.
Yeah.
But I do miss it. I have a lot of friends down there.
It's nice right now.
So let's talk about the accounts for a second, okay? So that we've talked about the theories here, the simple, tried and true way to invest your money, index funds all the way, ETFs, total stock market. Actually, before we get off this topic, you posted recently, you said pick 5 funds on one of your posts, or it was like an ETF, a total bond market, something you had written.
When I was comparing the best index funds?
It was one of your Instagram posts.
3-fund portfolio?
You want to talk about like a diversified portfolio.
Okay. Yeah. So it's only 3. So basically, if you Google 3-fund portfolio, there's a book written on it, and it's like kind of this famous thing. And basically, we've gone through a lot of the theory, but basically all you need to ever buy for the rest of your life, starting today and never change anything ever again, is basically 3 things. A US stock market index fund like VTSAX, if you're buying one at Vanguard, an international stock market index fund, or from a Canadian's perspective, a non-US stock market index fund like VTIAX, that's the Vanguard Total International Market Index Fund, and a bond index fund, which is VBTLX. V as in Victor, B as in Beta, Tango, Alpha, X-ray, VBTAX.
Okay.
And so those three things, US market index fund, international market index fund, bond index fund, are like your trifecta of like kind of getting most of everything. And anything that's not in that set basically doesn't give you a better chance of growing your money faster, right? And so, for example, I never buy gold because if you look at, this is a great example. I spent $4 yesterday and bought the historical gold prices since 1915. If you put $100 in gold in 1915, after accounting for inflation, today it would be worth about $400. So not bad. You quadrupled your money over 105 years. It's an annual compound growth rate of 1%. If you put $100 in the U.S. stock market in 1905 or 1915, today it would be worth $120,000. So it's $120,000 versus $400. And so it's like cripplingly different. Like, you know, if you're investing in gold, you're just going to get crushed. And every so often, every 5 or 10 years, people are like, oh, gold has outperformed everything in the last, 5 years. It's like, yeah, because gold just like zigzags like this based on the speculation of what people think they're going to pay for it in the next few years. Whereas the stock market is just an upward ramp that never stops because it's collecting the sum total of profits and innovation and efficiencies and population growth and revenues and everything of the sum total of the world economy. It's plowing into these stock index funds, and you can collect that by owning those things. So I never buy gold. I don't buy anything except total stock market index fund, total international stock market index fund, and the bond index fund. And those three ticker symbols I mentioned is all you ever need to buy.
Okay. Super simple method here, people. Just so simple. You mentioned dividends. Does the ETFs pay out dividends?
Absolutely. So if you have an ETF or you have an index fund, and like, let's say you have an S&P 500 ETF or index fund, then you own those 500 companies. And so if you or I own just Apple, like I mentioned, it's $300 a share, we get $6 a year. If I own all 500 of those stocks inside of the ETF, then the ETF basically collects all those and then pays them all out quarterly. So if you go open up a Vanguard account and buy one share of an S&P, like if you buy one share of VTSAX or whatever, and then just wait a year, then you can go look in your account history, and every quarter VTSAX pays out the dividends. And so it collects the dividends. And, it's a kind of a complicated process because they have to buy all the stock and do all the record keeping and everything. And that's what makes index funds so attractive, which is it's very difficult to buy 500 stocks as an individual because just logistically it would be a nightmare.
Oh man, rule your life doing that.
Right, exactly. But VTSX, they got some computers that do it, and they charge like a minuscule fee, like pennies on, like not even pennies on a dollar, like fractions of pennies on a dollar or whatever. And so then, yeah, it pays off the dividends and it goes right back in your account. And then when you have one of these accounts, a brokerage account, there's a little option in there that says, what do you want to do with the dividends? You can either keep them and it puts it into your savings account and you can go spend it on things that you like, or you can reinvest them, which basically means the moment that it pays out, it just takes that little dividend and then buys more of the exact same thing. And so if you're in the wealth accumulation phase of your life, you always want to have that reinvest dividends option turned on so that that further compounds the exponential growth over time of all these profits, right? So, over the course of a year, all these companies pay out. You take those profits, you buy more of buy more of all those companies, and then you get this exponential compound growth by all those profits kind of like snowballing back into themselves.
Can you explain compound growth for people that might not know what that is?
Yes, it's one of my favorite things. And so let's say you have $1,000, and let's say you get a 7% return on your money. You put $1,000 into the market. Let's say you invest $1,000 per year. So you're doing like about $100 a month or whatever. After your first year, your $1,000 will have a growth of 7%, which is $70. So at the end of year one, you'll have $1,070. I'm doing this in my head, so apologies if I get this math slightly wrong. Then year two, you invest another $1,000 just as part of your normal investing. And then something interesting happens, which is your second $1,000 makes $70, but then your first $1,000 also makes another $70. Since that's still invested, that pays you $70 again. So now you have the 1,000 plus 1,000, the 2,000 you put in, plus 370s, which is 210s. Now you're at 2210. But something even cooler happens, which is that $70 from the first year, the interest that you got from the first year, that starts paying off interest too. So now that $70 pays you 7%, which is like what, $4 or something. So then you have $2,214 your second year, right? And so
the math gets really complicated.
the math doesn't get, it's hard to do with the calculator. It's hard to do in your head, but there are calculators or Excel sheets or whatever that make it very easy. But you can see what's happening here is after year 2, the money that you put in the first year and the growth of money the first year starts automatically growing as well. And then in year 3, now you have year 1, year 2, and year 3 contributions all growing. The growth of year 1 and year 2 growing, and the growth of the growth growing. And so it's this compound snowball exponential thing. If you do this at year 10, the interest alone will be about $1,000. So just after 10 years of doing this, all the $1,000 you're putting every year, the growth is going to outpace what you're doing. And then at year 40, the growth is like $10,000 to your $1,000 you're putting in or something. It's like crazy.
I recommend you can Google compound interest calculator, put in some numbers that you can handle, or you can play with it and see where you want to be at too at the end. If you need to have 3 million to retire, you can play with it. But using the compound interest calculator got me really excited because it really does show you like how little could turn into a lot over a period of time.
Totally. And I love that tip because I think, to you and me, maybe it seems obvious, but I think a lot of people have never done that and never sat down at like a growth calculator or a retirement calculator and put in how much money they have, how much money they invest every month, and then see where it will go. And I think when you see that, you start to get an appreciation for compound growth. And you say, hey, if I do $200 a month instead of $100 a month, I'll have $1 million at retirement instead of $500,000. And suddenly when you're like, wow, these little changes now have this massive like magnification effect down the road. It encourages you to make those changes in your finances, I think.
Yeah, totally. Okay, so back to what I was gonna say. Let's talk about the different accounts and the tax saving benefits. Obviously, about America. It's similar in Canada, but everyone always asks me about the Roth IRA. So what is it? How does it work? How do people get it?
So I want to preface every question with the 2 rules, which is if any of these things start to scare you, just remember, spend less than you make, invest the difference. That is going to get you on the right path, and then learn and figure out the stuff later. So
only three ETFs that you said. It's so simple. I'm going to put I'll put like a easy description of what we talked about in the description, but yes, nice. Get into the Roth IRA.
So remember how I said there's a checking account, a savings account, and there's a brokerage account. And a brokerage account is where you buy and hold stocks and ETFs and index funds. At some point, the US government and the Canadian government made a similar decision, said, hey, we don't want a bunch of broke old people in the country. That's bad for business. That's bad for the business of being a country. When like everyone turns 70 and they're begging on the streets, like that is expensive. It's not a good look. It's not very moral or ethical or whatever. And so there's a thing called Social Security, but they're like, we prefer people to not even need Social Security and take care of themselves. And so they said, hey, what if we give them a brokerage account, but it has a special rule? And the rule is any money you put inside of this special brokerage account never, ever gets taxed again. And so that's what a Roth IRA is. When you put money into a Roth IRA, the growth is never taxed. And so, for example, if you put $5,000 in there and you're 25, and then when you're 65, it ends up being $50,000. If it was a regular brokerage account, the government would say, hey, you went from 5,000 to 50,000. You made $45,000. You owe us tax on that. It's called capital gains tax. Capital is stuff and gains is how much it gains. And so when your stuff gains money, you have to pay tax on that. But the Roth IRA said, hey, because as a government, and I think in Canada it's called the RRSP or the TFSA or something.
We have an RSP, which is our Royal Retirement Savings, which is basically the Roth IRA. Well, actually, no, we're taxed on that. The TFSA is fully tax-free, but we're taxed on the RSP at a lower rate.
Okay. So same ideas, but basically all these things are just accounts with a tax break. And so, and you know, there's some catches, right? You can't put an unlimited amount of money into a Roth IRA. The contribution limit this year in 2020 is $6,000. So just by law, you can't put $7,000 into it in a single year.
But you can
once
also
the money,
you can backlog the money that you never put in before. Is that true?
no, only up until tax day in the US. And so
In Canada, just a side note, with the TFSA, we get a limit per year, and we can go back like 10 years and fill it up if we never.
Oh, really? Oh, yeah. That is not the law in the US. I mean, I like that law. I think it is like, so we have like a use it or lose it situation where, you know, you can do 2019 up until tax day of 2020, which in this year, thanks coronavirus.
So this is like a motivation as well to get on this. People start.
No, I agree. And, you know, when people are like, oh, wait, I was like, don't wait. You know, I feel like, yeah, the Canadian rule kind of does like almost encourage, oh, I'll catch up later. But, you know, so I don't know which one's better, but yeah, that's what a Roth IRA is. And so, yeah, you can't put more than $6,000 in there. You actually can't take the growth out until you're 59 and a half. These are the rules the government has put in place to encourage the behavior they want, which is people not being broke when they're 70. And what's the other rule? Can't, contribution limit, can't take it out. I don't know. Those are the important ones.
Yeah. And then, so a good thing to understand is that inside Vanguard, Fidelity, and Schwab, you can have your Roth IRA in those accounts and invest within those systems, right?
Definitely. And so when you go to Vanguard.com and you click the big open an account button, the next thing it's going to ask you is like, what kind of account do you want to open? You could open up a Roth IRA or a regular brokerage account or a traditional IRA or, you know, a college savings account or some other type of account. And so, yeah, you choose those accounts, and based on which account you choose, it gets different tax benefits. And then Vanguard at the end of the year gives you a little tax form, just like you get a W-2 from your job. And then the tax form says what you did inside of Vanguard. Then you type that into TurboTax, or you give it to your tax preparer, and then you've successfully like navigated the tax situation. And so if you put into a Roth IRA, then the government knows not to tax you on that when it pays out dividends and when there's growth and stuff.
It continues to be so simple. There's no excuse out there not to get into this.
I mean, someone's listening to this podcast is like, what the fuck is this guy talking about? Roth IRA? I mean, so that's why, you know, I do try to keep it simple, and it honestly, you know, like, I feel like after talking to someone an hour, their head's spinning a little bit, but I'm like, but that's it. That was 1 hour of your life, and we crammed a lot into that hour. But if we do another hour, it's just going to be the same thing again, because this is all there is, and it's all you ever need to do. And so it's, you know, and it's a shame. I think this is true in Canada too, but in the US, like, we don't teach this. I don't know why. I'm almost like conspiracy level, like, on this, where I think that like big corporations prefer people to just work jobs and pay debt their whole life and basically be indentured servants to like major corporations. Because if everyone's financially independent and spending less, it's not good for the big companies. But, you know, I think we should teach it, and in a few hours of learning. And, you know, what I'm saying, I'm not selling anything. I'm not like some guru who's trying to like pitch you on this get rich quick thing. Like, what I'm telling you is the exact same thing you'll find in every classic book on investing. So go read anything by Jack Bogle, read Millionaire Next Door, read Rich Dad Poor Dad, read A Random Walk Down Wall Street, read The Simple Path to Wealth. Like, read them
Tony
all.
Robbins,
Money Master Your Mind, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
They all say the same thing, because the people who write books, they're not selling anything other than the book, which has the truth, right? But if you're watching YouTube and some guy pops up and he's pointing to his Ferraris behind him, and he's paying like a shit ton of money for those YouTube ads to try to like convert people into his like get rich quick program, like, there's probably something wrong there, right? Like, if it seems too good to be true, it probably is.
I love it, man. I love it. This is going to help a lot of people. Okay, what else do I have on my list? Okay, so what about target date funds? Fan or not a fan?
I love them. So first, what they are. So remember the three things I said that all you ever need to own.
Yeah.
Some friendly. So I guess once you know you need those three things, the next question is, okay, in what proportion do you buy them? And that choice that you make is called your asset allocation. How much do you allocate to each of these three assets: US, international, and bonds?
Yeah.
And, the answer is depends on your age, depends on your risk tolerance, depends on how gung-ho you are about the US or whatever. Did you hear that? Sorry, my computer's.
Oh yeah, you're good.
I can mute it. So some clever person at Vanguard and these other financial institutions said, hey, let's make it even simpler. We can take these, so each of these three things is a collection of thousands of stocks each. But someone said, hey, why even make them buy three things when they could buy just one thing? And so you take those three things and put them into a target date fund, which is a collection of those three different funds that grows or that automatically reallocates over time. So basically, if you're very young, it's almost entirely stocks. If you're kind of at your retirement age, it's about half stocks and half bonds. And if you're 90, it's like mostly bonds and cash. And so basically, it's just like this automated thing where it owns everything you need to own and then also does this reallocation for you. So it automatically steps through your asset allocation needs as time goes on. So I love them. The one warning I would give is that and these target date funds are named after a target retirement year. So I always say, take your birth year and add 65. So you and I, conveniently, were both born in 1980, plus 65 is 2045. So we could go to Vanguard.com, find a 2045 fund, put every single red cent to our name into that one fund for the rest of our lives. That would be basically, in my opinion, optimal investing. That's like the one thing you ever need. The warning I would give—
I will give you similar returns to your assets allocated into the three funds that you mentioned.
It's identical because it's the identical thing is inside of it. But the warning I would give is not every target date fund is a target date index fund. And so my big thing is TDIF, target date index fund, because there are also, a wolf in sheep's clothes who calls themselves the 2045 fund. But if you look at the expense ratio, it's high. And so the expense ratio on Vanguard's target date index funds is about 0.1% per year, which is very, very low.
Yeah.
But there are target date funds that are more like 1% per year, which is like 10 times higher. And paying 10 times more fees every single year over the course of a 40-year career can erode like a third to a half of your income growth or of your asset growth. So I love them. If someone wants to do a three-fund portfolio—
say that back one more time. So you're saying 10 times the fee. So even going up to 1% fee can erode half to a third of your growth.
Yeah.
See, that is crazy. And that I've read this, and every time I hear it, it still blows my mind. But that's something everyone should really take note of. When you pay high fees, it can erode so much growth and so much income. 1% is going to equal out to hundreds of thousands of dollars in the long run that you're losing.
So it's crippling, right? Because first of all, it's not just 1%, it's 1% per year. And so over every single year, if you have 40 years, it's like 1% times 40 years. But it's even worse than that, because when you take 1% of the first year, that is 1% that doesn't get to grow going forward, and the growth doesn't get to grow. And to break it down a different way, the market grows about 10% per year. Inflation takes about 3% per year. And so you're only really left with 7% per year. And then if you lose another 1% to fees, you're down to 6%. So it's kind of like making $70,000 a year and then losing $10,000 a year and going only to $60,000. And that entire extra $10,000 a year is going towards investing, which this is when you're letting compound growth happen. Taking that away can be devastating, right? And so that was kind of the brilliance of Vanguard and Jack Bogle, which is, he said, all this other stock picking, mutual fund, day traders, fund managers, stock traders, like all they're doing is they're shaving all the cream off the top, the beautiful growth, and like leaving us with like not enough to really make our investments as big as they should be.
So another thing, we didn't really talk about risk in this, right? When when you go into a mutual fund or you get a salesperson who is a financial advisor come to you, they're going to ask you your risk tolerance, and they're going to say, do you want to go into a high risk, medium risk, low risk? The method that you're talking about here, your method, which is the method of a lot of people, is very low risk over time. basically no risk over time. I mean, there's risk, but when you look at the numbers, it returned to 10% a year over the life of the S&P 500. So it's a very safe, low risk investment, correct?
So yeah, when a financial advisor asks that question, if you're hearing that question for the first time, it really shouldn't be a like off the cuff, what kind of person am I? Like, doesn't matter what kind of person you are. What you should be thinking is like, what's the correct thing to do? And be learning about the correct thing to do. And so I think the risk tolerance thing is almost irrelevant. Like if you're a 20-year-old with a very low risk tolerance, like read about, read one of those books I mentioned, and you'll understand why risk tolerance isn't an issue that you really need to be identifying in the early stages of your growth, right? So, but to your point, for example, the VTSAX, the Vanguard Total Stock Market Index Fund, that can't go to zero. If that goes to zero, what that means is every single company in the United States is no longer operating. That means there's no Amazon, there's no Shell gas stations, there's no General Electric, there's no Ford, there's no energy companies. And if every single company in the US is not operating, then, and I don't know if that's going to happen because I can't tell the future, but I know that if it does happen, then it doesn't matter how you invested your money, right? If you had gold, or if you had cash, or if you had Bitcoin or magic beans, like none of that matters. Like what matters is that you're living in this like apocalyptic world where
I talked about this at the beginning of COVID because I kept telling everyone, I'm like, unless the world's about to end, we all should be investing our money right now. It's ridiculous. Time will show this is going to bounce back, or like you said, Armageddon, we're living with Mad Max in the desert.
Yeah. And like I said, I don't know if it's gonna happen. So like there are preppers out there who like have bug out locations and have fresh water reserves and like, I don't know, like maybe like I guess I'm not that worried about it because I don't have one of those things, but like, and if it does, like they're gonna be in better shape than I am. But I tend to think the world and humanity are pretty resilient folks and are gonna figure out any impending crises. And when they do, there are still going to be companies that are still going to be, and they might be different companies for sure. Like if like the crazy thing happens, like, right now we're going through a pretty interesting shift where, certain industries are being hit very hard and certain industries are benefiting. But like you said, like index funds have this like beautiful self-cleansing feature, which is as different companies are growing faster. So in the example of the S&P 500, if like the 501st company starts growing faster than the 500th company and gets bigger, then those two are just swapped out. And the other 499 stay the same. And so if you look at the 500 biggest companies of like 1950 and the 500 biggest companies of today, very few of them actually overlap. But over time, as they filtered out over those 70 years, you've always owned the top 500, and that top 500 is growing and growing and growing and growing. And so it's not like you're not really ever seeing a company like go out of business in the S&P 500.
Yeah. Okay. That makes a lot of sense.
So, so to your question about risk is while there's no real risk of it going to zero other than the risk of, the Armageddon happening, there is volatility, which we experienced in this March and April where the market dropped by about 30%. And so if you are investing for your first time ever and you have dutifully saved up $10,000 and you put it on the market on February 29th and you checked a month later and you went from 10,000 to 7,000, that would be a bad feeling. But here's the thing. One is you don't actually lose anything unless you sell. All you own is shares. And when you look at the dollar amount, all that's telling you is what you could sell it for today. But that doesn't matter. In fact, what matters is what you will sell it for in 40 years or whenever you hit retirement. And so and as Warren Buffett says, any sort of drop in the market should be warmly embraced by people in the wealth accumulation phase of their life because they get to buy more at a lower price. Like if you are a net buyer of stocks, you want those prices to go down. Just like if you are a net buyer of vintage goods, you want to pay less for the thing so that later you can pay more for the thing, right? The same is what's true with stocks. And then if you are in retirement, so someone says, okay, fine, what if you're 70 and that happens? Well, if you're 70, over the previous 30 years or so, you were slowly converting from stocks to bonds. And so over the, like the target date index fund does, or if you have a 3-fund portfolio, you would automatically be reallocating such that when you hit 70, maybe you're more like 60% bonds, 40% stocks. So if the 30% drop hits, your portfolio would only drop by about 10 or 12% or something. And if you go from $1 million to 900,000 for a year, no big deal, because 2 years later, it's going to be up to 1.1 million and you can just continue on your life. And so I think of volatility as a yo-yo as you're walking upstairs. And so the yo-yo is always going like this, but you're walking upstairs. So you're always making progress. And so it feels kind of like, oh, down, up, down, up, down, up. But then when you look over the course of the whole staircase, the whole yo-yo is way higher than it used to be. And if you look at the US historical stock market, that's exactly what you see. There's like these kind of weird, jagged, unpredictable drops. And then it goes up higher than it ever was. You know, it's like down 30%, up 200%, down 30%, up 200%, that kind of thing.
Yeah. So essentially, don't freak out when it drops. It was scary for a lot of people. And I think you even posted one thing on your Instagram saying you were down like 150 grand or 100 grand or something.
Yeah. Like that was in one day. Like I had some pretty ugly days. I mean, yeah. So I think I mentioned like, yeah, my net worth right now is about $3.5 million. And so, yeah, so when the market drops by 10% in a day, which it did a couple of times in this March, like that's $350,000 as an impact to my, you know, some of my money is in like the condo you see behind me and not all in the US stock market. But yeah, I had some like $100,000 drops, but, you know, but as of today, it's higher than where it was at the beginning of the year. And so, and the thing is, all these drops, every human instinct people have about investing is wrong. And so all these drops seem in retrospect to have been obvious. Oh, of course, coronavirus is going to crash the market. But the thing is, in February, if you talk to someone about coronavirus, they either haven't heard of it or they're like, oh, it's just like swine flu. It's just like Ebola. It's just like bird flu. It's just one of these little things we hear about that seems to exist only in China. And so, and never has hurt the stock market. And so only a crazy person would be selling every single time that happened. And if you did sell every single time that happened, you would have been hurt by missing out on the growth during the previous ones. And then like the day where everyone's like, oh shit, this is real. The thing basically, you know, where it's like, oh, we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what's going to happen. And then like kind of, I think it was like on March 28th was like the lowest point so far of this year, hopefully the whole year. Then like China kind of got figured out. Italy was kind of turning the corner. Everyone's like, oh, wait a minute, the world's not ending. And that's like straight back up, back to where we were. And you can't know when those things are going to happen ahead of time. It's impossible. And so the only wise, coherent, humble, smart, experienced thing to do is to invest early and often and stay the course. You never time the market. You never jump in and out. You never sell anything until you retire. You just put more money into either those 3 funds or your one target date index fund, and that's it. And it's not, and when people hear such a simple solution, I think a lot of the time they want to think, oh, he's just giving like this basic version of the thing. There's a more advanced thing that I really should be doing. Like, no, this is going to beat 97% of investors, like what I just described, because 97% of investors are screwing something up and they're paying fees, they're jumping in and out of the market, they're getting burned. When you guarantee yourself your full share of the full market growth, you're going to beat almost everyone. And the 3% that beat you are lucky, not good. And so don't take a 3% out of 100% chance of being the lucky one. Guarantee yourself the 97% and put your effort into just putting more money in. That's how you actually build wealth.
I believe Tony Robbins said that. He said 98% of mutual fund managers is a hedge fund the same as a mutual fund?
Basically, yeah, basically.
So basically 98% of hedge fund managers, or sorry, the index fund beats out 98% of hedge fund managers all the time.
Yep.
So how are you going to take that gamble? And it's the same thing if you're trying to pick your own stocks, you're in that, you're in that 98%. And what about, a lot of people say, so I don't know if you told me this, but do you do 90% into this method and then 10% fund money, or do you go 100% in?
So there's nothing wrong with going 100% in. I think that's the most wise and likely path to maximizing your wealth. But I realize that humans are imperfect, including myself, and we have hunches and we want to gamble and we want to hit it big and we want the lotto ticket. And so I have what I call my 90-10 rule. With 90% of your portfolio and your future contributions to your portfolio, buy and hold index funds. Just like we described, those 3 or that one. 90% always, never touch it, never sell anything until you retire. Then with 10%, go nuts. Buy Bitcoin, day trade, pick stocks, Beyond Meat, Forex, whatever. Actually, not Forex, it's a scam. But whatever you want to do with that 10%, go nuts. And, because I think it does two things. One, over the course of some serious time, like 5+ years, you can compare the growth of those two portions of your portfolio, and 98% of people will see that their index funds have outperformed their hunches. But then the other thing it does is it does give you your lotto ticket. So if you really have this hot stock tip you're really excited about, you can go buy it, and you can basically, it can be like a pressure release valve where
Yeah.
you don't have to put the other 90% of your nest egg at risk.
It cures the itch for people who like to gamble. They get to have fun. It's almost like playing a game.
Yeah. And if it hits, then, great. If you're the next Warren Buffett, there's very few Warren Buffetts. There's only one so far. And so, but if you're the next one and you're so smart, you're like the one guy out there who can beat the market, then, 10% should be plenty to become the next Warren Buffett, right? Your 10% will far outpace your 90%. And then you can tell me how many to ever, but
and you got to stick to the rule. You can't, if you hit it once, don't go take your 90% and try to hit it again.
Keep the original 90% there, like growing forever, and then with your 10% you can keep reinvesting your 10% if you want. But when you lose it all, you'll be glad your 90% is still there.
So I think we basically covered it all. I think that was amazing info, and I hope a lot of people get into it because of this.
Thanks, Drew. Thanks for having me. It was a pleasure. I hope my over exuberant yelling hasn't scared people, but
it was awesome. I love that you're so enthusiastic about it. I love that you're helping people. You're spreading the knowledge. Like I said before, it's all about getting people into this. It doesn't take away from your wealth if other people get into this method. It's like there's enough of this to go around. When you spread the love, spread it around.
Thanks, man. I agree. I think it helps people. I think it's good for the world. I think we can solve a lot of the world's problems with better financial literacy, and people, in addition to like the other massive problems that need addressing. But one of the things is just education and letting people, give them a chance to like better their own financial situation.
Perfect. All right, we're going to call it there.
Thank you for listening to this episode. Hope you got a lot of value from that. I'm going to do a quick recap of what we discussed so you can break it down. We jump around a lot in this episode. There's a lot of information here to kind of get your head around. Okay, so simple, easy method here. You need to get a brokerage account. If you're in America, you want to get a Vanguard, Fidelity, or Schwab account. Jeremy says you can get an account through your bank, but you might be paying higher fees. And when you look at those fees over time, they're going to add up, and it's going to be equivalent to hundreds of thousands of dollars loss in your portfolio. If you're in Canada, I did some research. Questrade and Wealthsimple are two great Canadian brokerage accounts you can get with very low fees for trades, and I think free trades on ETFs on Questrade or Wealthsimple. Anyway, go check it out. Do your research. By the way, disclaimer, this whole episode, this is our views. It's Jeremy's views. Go do your research. Please go do your research. All right, back to the recap. Okay, for the stock tickers, Jeremy says, okay, thank you for listening to this episode. Thank you, Jeremy, for enlightening us with your methods. Obviously, there are many methods to investing. This is the lazy way, a proven way, a safe way. So, take it for what it's worth. Quick disclaimer here. This is just our views. This is not investing advice. You need to do your own research. We are just telling you our methods and our views on the subject here. Okay. So I want to do a recap of everything we discussed. Okay. First things first, you need to get an investment account. You need somewhere to invest that money within an account. Now, the brokerage accounts that we talked about in the US, Vanguard, Fidelity, Schwab. These are really good, low fees. You can do it through your bank and they'll give you an account, but you might pay higher fees. And as we discussed, fees will kill your profits over time. They will kill your portfolio and possibly end up with hundreds of thousands of dollars of loss over the life of your investments. In Canada, I did some research. Wealthsimple and Questrade are really good accounts. Okay. Next, you want to think about tax savings. So you want to utilize whatever the government of your country's tax haven accounts are. In America, it's your Roth IRA. That helps you save your taxes. It defers taxes. Actually, I believe it's tax-free. You have an allotment per year to invest in there. So start maxing out your Roth IRA. Then you can go to an investment account. In Canada, we have the RSP, which defers tax until you take the money out later. Do some research. We have the TFSA, which is 100% tax-free savings account, which you can make millions in there tax-free if you're good with your money. We have the education savings funds for your children, which the government matches and helps you invest. So there's lots of different options. So max out all your tax savings accounts first before you go into a regular investment account where you will pay capital gains. Okay, now the simple method that he discussed, it's 3 stock tickers you need to invest in. In America, it's VTSAX. That's an S&P 500 total stock ETF. VBTLX, which is your bond market ETF, and the VITAX, which is an international market indexed ETF. Okay, that's it. 3. The allocation breakdown that Jeremy recommends is 54% VTSAX, 10% VBTLX, and 36% VITAX. Okay, check it out. I'll put everything down in the comments or the description below so you can actually see it there. And you don't, but anyway, take notes. For Canada, I looked up the equivalents. The problem is index funds and ETFs don't go across borders. So Canadians can't invest in these same funds, although there is, and those are all Vanguard funds, by the way. Now, Vanguard has different funds for Canada. So I'm going to tell you the tickers for Canadians to invest. For the total S&P market, the total US market index fund is VFV, okay? Again, 54% into VFV. For the Canadian bond market that you want to invest in is VLB, 10% into that. Then the emerging markets index fund, which is similar to the international fund, is VWO, 36% into that. Okay, again, I'll put it down below. Very simple stuff here. Another thing I want to talk about, the 90-10 rule. 90% of your money should go into something like this. It's proven you're going to get the 10% a year over time. 10%, go crazy. Play Bitcoin, play Tesla, play whatever you want. Get crazy, learn. You know, at least that way you're only going to lose 10% of your money while you learn about this stuff, because it does take time. I lost a lot of money messing with weed stocks. You know, it was not a good market and I didn't know what I was doing. But that's okay, because it gave me my education into investing. Now I've done my research. That's why I got Jeremy on. I'm a lot smarter and I'm going with this method, and I believe in this method. This is the method they won't tell you about when you go to see your financial advisor, because they want to sell you the mutual funds with high fees where they can make some money. Okay. I think that covers it. I think that's a good wrap up. Anyway, take notes, do your research. If you have more questions about this, you can definitely ask me. Hopefully I have answers for you. Jeremy, again, thank you for doing this. I hope you guys really learned something. Again, I did this for you guys. I did this because I want you to be educated. I want to help people. I wish people helped me when I was younger, and I would have got started earlier. I'm almost 40. I've only been investing for a few years. If you start doing this in your 20s, you are going to be retired by the time you're my age. Be retired by the time you're my age. Then you can just buy t-shirts for a hobby. You know, so many people right now are killing it in this vintage t-shirt game, right? Mark my words, it cannot last forever. It cannot last forever. You need to take some money out of that game, put it into investments for your future so you can retire young. Then you can buy t-shirts for fun. It doesn't matter. It's just a game at that point, okay? Again, I did this to help you guys out. I hope you find some knowledge in this. If you like what I post, if you appreciate what I'm doing here, helping you guys out, please go check out my Patreon. There will be bonus exclusive content from Jeremy on the Patreon, as well as every other guest, okay? There's different tiers you can sign up for. It helps me. It helps me keep putting out content, and I truly appreciate it. So if you want to support, go support. If you don't want to support, I totally get it. That's fine, and I will still keep doing this, and I hope you find value. Again, if you want to go use my Amazon link down below, that also helps me out. I have a curated selection of business and vintage books in there in my Amazon store that are great references for you guys. And literally, if you buy anything through my Amazon link, I get a kickback. I appreciate it. That's it. That's it. Enjoy life. Be good to each other. Be happy, not crappy. In the words of Dave Heifetz, talk to you soon.